Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio. Today is Tuesday, March the 11th, 2025, and we're glad that you have joined us. And Michael's getting ready this afternoon to fly up to Kansas City to see our newest grandson. I'm going to be staying here with Lincoln and Brian, so I'm not going to be going with him, but we will be live the rest of the week. And so hold just one moment. And
Live from Kansas City.
He'll be live from Kansas City. So I'm going to hand the phone over to him.
Welcome, everybody, to Mind Shifters Radio. Delighted and honored that you're here and that we get to move forward in this conversation about first century Aramaic forgiveness. And delighted that you're here. Hi, Solly from a long, long way away. I think, Solly, if I'm correct, you're in Sweden. And so delighted that you're here, along with everybody else is joining us. And looking forward to how today's show unfolds. What we're going to cover, I don't know. We'll see what the direction that the conversation goes. And I just had a little technical malfunction. My apology. Got it straightened out. And so we'll see what kind of perhaps calls we get, if anybody's out there with a thought for us. I had a couple of texts from a gentleman that I thought I would talk about. And it was basically a comment, started out as a comment from a seminar that this gentleman had been at, where he was studying nutrition, and they brought forward a quote from one of my favorite neuroscientists, Candace Pert. Really a shame that Candace left her body behind a few years ago. She loved the forgiveness work, and we enjoyed the conversations that we had, although they were relatively brief. Candace Pert's the person who discovered opiate receptors in the brain. She worked at the National Mental Institute of Health. She wrote a book, and let's see, I'm not recalling the name of the book at this moment. But there are a couple of quotes that this gentleman sent to me, and I thought I would share them with you. And just Finland. Okay, Saul, delighted. Glad you're joining us. You know, you can talk to us just by pushing one if you want to say hello. That would be awesome. And beyond that, oh yes, that's right. Don't push one. Push the call button. Excuse me, I'm still back in January. Anyway, Candace Pert, National Mental Institute of Health. Most psychologists treat the mind as disembodied, a phenomenon with little connection to the physical body. Conversely, physicians treat the body with no regard to the mind or the emotions. Her book is Molecules of Emotion. But the body and the mind are not separate. We cannot treat one without the other. Pretty brilliant piece of information that Candace Pert gives us. Pardon me. And a second quote that was sent, and I wanted to make a slight adjustment to it as this was sent to me. One of the other quotes from her book he had sent was, "Your body is your subconscious mind, and you can heal it by talk alone." Now, I'd make a couple of adjustments in that quote. Most often, different fields talk about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and they leave out a really important third realm. Or they use the word subconscious to represent that third realm, which means they leave out the second realm. You know, when we're talking about what the world calls a mind, and strictly speaking, my offering would be it isn't a mind at all. All it is a database that through resonance sends up whatever information is held in it. But there are three levels at which this cellular function operates. And like comparable to a radio. Let's say I'm sitting listening to a radio and I'm tuned to a certain frequency and I've got the volume up loud. That would be like the conscious mind. If I turn the volume all the way down, it's still there, but it's not accessible. I can't hear it. That would be like the subconscious mind. And conscious and subconscious are continuously trading places. So if I say, don't think about the color of your car, notice something moves in your mind regarding the color of your car. Even if you're a wise guy saying, well, I'm not thinking about it, really, what is it you're not thinking about? In order to not think about it, the energy had to move in your mind. And so conscious and subconscious are changing places all the time. If I ask you what the front door of your house looks like, notice that subconscious information. You can visualize or get a sense of what the front door of your house looks like. What's your favorite item of clothing? What's your favorite food? Notice you're not thinking, quote unquote, thinking about the color of your car. So that's an example of conscious and subconscious changing places. But then the third realm, and the one that's really most relevant and important to this work, is the unconscious. And that is, if I said to you, well, you're on this show probably because you have a major issue in your life that you're ready to deal with. And what I'd like you to do is tell me exactly what that issue is. And I'm saying that to everybody. So imagine that I'm on the line with you personally right now, and you're live on the show. And I say that to you. What happens? Well, for most people, they'll hold their breath, for starters, which means that the energy that's trying to come to the conscious level from the unconscious is stifled. It's shut down. Now, that would be like my radio analogy, conscious, subconscious, the volume's up, the volume's down. What if I turn the radio off altogether? The signal's still coming in the room. It's still hitting the antenna. So the signal is still inside of the radio. And if the power is turned off, then it's not available. It's unconscious. It won't be available until I open the power supply. What's the power supply that opens the unconscious mind? It's the breath. What's the power supply that, when extracted, closes the unconscious mind or creates this unnatural condition called an unconscious mind? It's the holding of the breath. And so the information about what the major issue in your life is there inside of you, but if it tries to resonate and come forward, because we tend in our culture to not want to look at those things, so we live in denial and dissociation. Dissociating from something means I'm unconscious of that. My offering is that the unconscious mind is a totally and completely unnatural condition. In our natural state, we would have a conscious mind and a subconscious, which would mean we would be able to access anything within us at any time, simply by, quote unquote, turning up the volume or causing that information to resonate. But in too many cases, you watch yourself and you watch others, especially where there's some sort of disturbance or upset, and you watch people holding their breath, creating this unconscious mind. And then, so Candace says, your body is your subconscious. I would offer, it's designed to be your subconscious, but for most people, it mostly represents the unconscious. If you listen to the psychologists today, they'll tell us that 90 or 80, 90, 95, maybe as much as 98% of our so-called thinking is unconscious. Which means what? We're not consciously aware of it. And so the average person lives with this unconscious state moving all the time. And then when she says you can heal it by talk alone, in a sense that's accurate, but only if you use the talk that you're doing to access the energetic patterns created by thoughts that never belonged within the system. If we turn to the work of Bruce Lipton, he tells us that when you think a thought, he's measuring this in the laboratory, it turns into a molecule called a neuropeptide, and that neuropeptide circulates around in the structure. That thought literally circulates around in the structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches. And it lands on the cell and inserts itself in the cell. And if you were inside of the cell watching that insertion take place, you would say chemistry just came into the cell. Of course, it's not chemistry, it's mind energy. If we go to the opening words in the book of John, it doesn't say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. It says, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. So when she talks about you can heal it, and so heal your body as well as your mind by talk alone, she knows exactly what she's saying. Except we have to take it one step further. If our talk is about taking responsibility for, and we understand how to remove the thought patterns, the neuropeptides that have turned into destructive chemistry, if we learn how to access those neuropeptides, those thoughts, and change them, then we're literally changing what they call the chemistry of the body. So locating and changing thought disorders alone is really what it's going to take, because I can sit and talk all day long about my problems and how terrible this is and how terrible the world is and what's going on here and what's going on there, and never take responsibility for or shift a pattern within my mind that doesn't belong there. And so the objective of this work is to take responsibility for those energetic patterns and bring a change about in them. One of the other things that was sent to me by this gentleman was a cover of a copy of a book called Anything Can Cause Anything. I think it's probably the same book, Dawn. I'm not sure. I'm familiar from years ago and it's maybe changed its title, or maybe it's just a subtitle that doesn't appear on the cover of the book. But anything can cause anything, anything can cure anything. And the reason why that's true is because if you change your mind, you change your body. And, the mind and the body are like flip sides of the same coin. If I look at a silver dollar and I say, oh, there's the head of George Washington, and on the tail I say, no, well, there's a bird on there. I look at it, I'm looking at one perspective and I see George Washington, and I see another perspective with this bird. And I could have people, perhaps, if they didn't understand that they were just different sides of the same coin, I could have people arguing over, why are you calling me a liar by saying it's not George Washington? Well, a thought is one side of the body, the metaphor of the coin. The thought is one side, and the other side is what we call the body. And, that old song, you can't have one without the other. They are connected. And so when we learn this, how the mind operates within the body, and we become aware of, and the skill that I hear Yeshua 2,000 years ago inviting people to develop is a skill of being able to literally go into their own cellular structure, access the destructive thought disorders, the quote unquote chemistry that is producing disease conditions within one's system, and removing or forgiving those energies. That's the bottom line of what we really want to do. So in short order, that's what the texts were about that I wanted to share with you. And I've seen as how you're on with us, Dawn. Do you have any thoughts, any refinements for that? Questions, answers? Would be a delight if you want to push that call button, and we could carry on a conversation about it. Beyond that, if we recognize that this energy system is, and we learn to look through the eyes of energy rather than all that we've been taught about things, we'll see that we've got something quite different than a body. And the objective, a part of the objective of this work, is to learn to soften into and embrace any form of resistance in the body, or what we call the body, that the mind has to looking at and dealing with what's been locked in. And the key way to accessing that, you've heard us talk about still point breathing, the key way to accessing those parts of the mind is literally the breath. And so when one breathes and softens into and embraces any kind of resistance, remembering that in the Aramaic language, the word Satan is not about a dude with a red suit, a tail, and a pitchfork. The word Satan means the resistor, one who misleads. And when you deal with physiological resistance and let go of that resistance and move into the natural state of your structure, it's a softened, flowing state where all tissue is a superconductor, where nothing is held locked down in tissue because I don't want to look at it. So one of the tools we offer in doing that, you perhaps have heard us talk about the love exchange tool, where you get quiet, sit with a partner, close your eyes, tap into the deepest, clearest love that you can, and then extend that love out through your eyes to your partner. You feel, most people, when they do that exercise, we do that in an intensive, most people, when I ask them, how did you feel before and how do you feel afterward? It's like, wow, things have loosened up. I feel a whole lot better. Why? Is it because of the fact that a partner you were working with, extended love in your direction? Or was it because you extended love toward them? I'd offer it's probably both. And one of the reminders that I would offer to people is to put yourself into a perpetual love exchange with your own tissue structure. And as you do that, on deeper and deeper levels, you will arouse the awareness that your literal state of being is that of love. And so living in that state is the primary objective of this work. And, there's a great line in the Course in Miracles that says, you need not seek for love. You need only seek, find, and I add to that, release all the barriers you built within yourself against it. Letting go of literally the resistance in your physiology. I have been gone for a week, and I see we've got a caller. So before I get into that topic, let's say hello to our caller. Don, how are you, young man? Are you with us, Don?
Hello, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
I'm good. It's my first time calling in on Needle, and sorry for the delay. I had to put my Bluetooth headphones on because I typically listen on a Bluetooth speaker, which doesn't allow me to talk to it. So.
Well, delighted. How do you be?
I'm pretty good. How are you? Getting ready for your big trip?
I'm on a plane in about the next couple of hours, and by this evening, I'll be holding my new 11 days circling the Earth grandson. So looking forward to that big time. We got to spend some time with our grandson here, who's been traveling the Earth now for 6 months, and our granddaughter last night, to say goodbye to them as I'm going to meet my new grandson, who is also my namesake. So it's pretty cool. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's great. You're going to be in presence of that pure love for a while.
Absolutely, yes. I've got 2 weeks with him and my son and my daughter-in-law.
Let me go kind of backwards. You were talking about, this is one thing I wondered about. I think you'll agree with, but I'm not sure. So you often talk about, Satan as the deceiver, one who misleads.
Right.
And I sometimes get fixated. I wonder about the use of the word one, because that sort of implies that there's still, like you often like to say, a guy in a red suit with tail and a pitchfork. But I kind of think of it as, rather than using the word one, that it's really just an energy, like everything in the universe is. When you say one, it's not an embodied being, right?
Good point. Absolutely. You're right on. Yes.
Okay, good. And then to go back to the Candace Pert thing in that book. So the book I sent you about anything can cause anything.
Before we Let's back up just a second as I'm really tapping into what you're saying and agreeing with you in one sense, but in another, actually, this non-being self, the resistor in us, shows up in the mind as a false self and does become an entity of the mind. So, I'm just contemplating that. That's a new thought to drop that word one. But really, you hear Yeshua at one point saying, and I mean, my take is he's saying to the being, he's saying, being, in order for you to truly live, in order for you, love, to inhabit this body, that which you thought you were, the one you thought you were, is going to have to die. And that's the one that's made up of all the resistance and all the lies and all the frauds. And if we allow that to be the source of our thinking, I was really contemplating this one yesterday as I was doing some work in the compost pile, and how Yeshua is talking, at one point to some of those who are stuck in hostility and fear mode. And he says to them, your father, and I would interpret in this case the word father as the source of your thinking, is a liar. There is no truth in him. Anything that comes from carbon-based memory, let's just take one simple fact about what comes. By definition, if it comes from carbon-based memory, it had to be there at least some fraction of a second ago, so it's from the past, and it's presenting itself as a present moment experience. So when he says there is no truth in him, or no truth in the source of our thinking, the false self, then the word one is appropriate to have there, but I think adding that distinction in is a really important point.
So would you say that, because I know you say the unconscious mind is really, doesn't exist, or shouldn't
Well, it's
exist,
not natural.
Right. So to take it to the next step, would you say that the deceiver, let's say the deceiver energy, or the energy that misleads, would that be in part or in whole this unconscious mind, which is not natural?
Well, my take would be it comes from, when he says you've got to get rid of it, comes from this unconscious state. But it formulates itself into a picture of, we see ourselves a certain way, and if we're living in perception, then, and that's the father or the source of our thinking, there's nothing true about it, because there's nothing present moment in perception. It's all from the past. It's all a fraud. It's all a lie. But it would mostly be a reflection, I would take it as, of the unconscious, of what we've dissociated from, of what we've hidden from ourselves. And then you bring Carl Jung into it, where he says, until the unconscious, that part we've hidden that lies to us, becomes conscious, it will direct our lives. So
Right.
by bringing the hidden part of the mind forward, recognizing its fraud, and exposing it to the active presence of love delivered by the breath, is what dissolves it and takes us into that superconductor state where the energy moves through us rather than get stuck in us. So that would be kind of heading in the direction. What does that resonate for you?
No, that makes sense. That's definitely helps me understand it better. So as long as I'm on the call here, which is rare, I have had a question for a long time about prayer,
Right.
and wanted more your thoughts on that. So and I've asked several people, whatever, how they pray, or what. I hate to use the word mechanics, but I have to. Like, what are the actual mechanics of prayer? I know that you always talk about that prayer is actually, setting a trap for God, which makes sense. Use that antenna analogy, which is very good.
I don't think it's an analogy. I think it's an actual fact.
Okay. Well, yeah, because I believe that our brains or minds are actually both antennas and transmitters. I
Right.
don't know if you would agree with that, but
Yes, I would.
So when I think of prayer, all I think back to is like how you're taught as a kid to pray,
Right.
and which I like doesn't sit well with me. I know you talk about the placing an order from the cosmic gift catalog, and that's not really prayer, and that's typically the kind of things when you're a kid, when you first taught about prayer, you sort of do. I mean, you also, I guess, ask for so and so to be blessed or so and so to be healed, family members, but like whenever I have tried to pray and because I don't really know a good definition other than you're trapped, forgotten, but that doesn't go into what I would call like the mechanics of it. I know some people I've heard in the past say, prayer is, asking questions, and meditation is listening for the answers. And I don't know that that's actually accurate. They do seem to be two somewhat different things. But I'd like to know, and I know in terms of the Lord's Prayer, that you talk about in your enlightening book on the radio, that's more an instruction. That's not an actual prayer that you're supposed to repeat over and over like
Right.
you do in church or the Apostles' Creed or the stuff they have you recite. How you actually view what prayer is, the importance of it, the mechanics. I will say, like at a somewhat lower point in my life not too long ago, I had coincidentally, serendipitously, a couple of Mormon girls come to my door, and I started, and then they came, quite a few times, and then they like to rotate. And they can't have, women can't be in your house alone if you're a male. So they have to have like an adult Mormon person come with them. But I went
Right.
through, I was talking to them and actually introduced your work to a couple and tried to talk to them about your work as we went on. And in one adult that came with two of the young men was, downloaded your book, and he was really thrilled with it. He said when he got done, like or I guess he printed it out, because he said when he got done, almost the whole book was highlighted. So of course,
Awesome.
they have some ideas that I can't accept. I kind of applaud them for their beliefs and going around, even though I don't agree with them. And I told them that from the beginning. And I engaged with, like I said, several different groups, because they rotate in and out of different areas all the time.
Right.
For
Right.
quite a long time. But I was really appreciative, because it was that interaction when I was kind of at a low point that made me remember about
Right.
you and
Brightened
your
you
work.
up, eh?
That's when I started listening again, which I hadn't done in quite a while, because I just kind of forgot about it, I guess, or I was, in some other mode. But eventually they, and I actually went to a service once or twice, and then like a little study group. I never really considered, joining the church,
Right.
because there's just too many, especially that church. There's some, I mean, it's true of every religion, but there's some weird beliefs that I would never be able to accept. But
Not your thing, right?
Yeah, eventually they wanted me to join, and it was clear that I've kind of discovered this Michael Ryce guy, and the stuff he does to me is so far beyond anything else that I've ever encountered, that I don't think I could do it. So eventually they kind of stopped coming.
Right.
But they do a lot of service work. They offered to help me move.
Yep.
It still hasn't happened, and all kinds of stuff. So
Right.
anyway, circle back to the prayer thing. What's your feeling about prayer, meditation, mechanics, purpose?
So here's my take. You've heard me say this before. The ego, or the non-being mind, compared to the mind of being, the mind of love, has a cheap copy of everything real in the actuality. So carbon-based memory, perception, has copies. They're cheap copies. They're not real. They're not factual, but they look pretty good to most people. So, for instance, a human being is created as the active presence of love. And so what's happened in the non-being world, instead of the word love being an agreed definition of who we are, it's become sexual athletics or putting your head on the chopping block and sacrificing yourself, all kinds of crazy things. Forgiveness, instead of being a tool with which I go inside myself and remove my pain or my trauma, it's become, I'm going to let somebody else off the hook because, of course, all my pain is somebody else's fault. So we could go through, there's quite a bit of noise in the background. I don't know if maybe you can mute for a minute.
Okay, sure.
So when we get into forgiveness, changing the content of your own mind, the ego or the non-being mind's cheap copy of that is letting other people off the hook. Prayer, when we say means to set a trap for God, means that I am properly oriented and aligned so that, like the TV antenna, if it's oriented, aligned properly, it picks up a signal and brings that signal into the TV. If I'm oriented, aligned properly, if I'm in a state of prayer, and this really makes sense when you hear that statement that says, there'll come a time when your whole life will become a prayer. Does that mean I have to spend my whole life on my knees with my hands folded? And it's a silly definition. But if I recognize that if I'm oriented properly, if I'm aligned properly, and I have forgiven the root of hostility or fear from within me, then literally moving through space at about 7,000 miles an hour means there's an exchange of energy with that in which we live, move, and have our being. And I become an energy field that captures that energy that's been called love, that's been called God, and reflects that into the world. Yes, we're designed to live our whole life in prayer. It's got nothing to do with putting order into the cosmic gift catalog. The cheap copy of prayer is petition. Now, there's a proper place, and if we're talking in a consistent language, then when I say, God, would you bless this person? Would you do this? Would you do that? Would you do this? I'm petitioning. I'm not praying. That's become confused. If you go back and you read that whole passage, obviously, and it's still a point of confusion, 2,000 years ago, here are these men who've all been brought up in a very deeply and very steeply engaged in this religion called Judaism, and they don't know what the word prayer means, so they say to Yeshua, they're obviously confused. They didn't say, would you say a prayer for us? They said, teach us to pray. They didn't know what it meant. And if you listen to the instructions in the Aramaic Lord's Prayer, and when we get off the show, I'll send you a link to that, to a video, or anybody can go on YouTube and find our the Lord's Prayer, living, not saying the Lord's quote-unquote prayer. So what he gives them is a set of instructions for how to align themselves, how to orient their minds, their thinking, and what they need to do in order to literally capture the essence of the energy field of love that we're moving through and bring it into physiology and reflect it into the world. That's all that prayer means. And he told them how to do that. He didn't say a prayer for them. But what most people in the world today and most of churchianity is talking about when they say prayer is they're talking about petitioning God, telling God what God should be doing today. So I think you have to divorce those two ideas totally and literally throw out anything to do with, I'm asking the Creator for something here. That's not prayer. But petitioning the Creator for something, okay, ask and you receive. Go for it. But in no way, shape, or form is the word prayer appropriate. But if I think, like everything else, if I think prayer means this, then I'll pursue this. which means I'm walking in the opposite direction of that. And again, just about every key word in the Aramaic language has been turned backward by the Greeks. If I'm looking to, I'm told I'm supposed to live in Rachma, I'm supposed to live as the presence of love, but my mind's been told that love is sexual athletics, and I want love. What am I going to do? I'm going to chase sex. And people are chasing things because their definitions are out of alignment. You hear Yeshua, or you hear the scriptures saying, the power of life and death is in our words. If we're pursuing things that we don't understand because the words have been confounded and the words have been confused, then we destroy ourselves. That's where the power of life and death lies, is getting our definitions accurate and having the same brain cells firing in us that was firing in Yeshua. And that, to me, is why the Aramaic is so important to understand and to comprehend, is that if Yeshua says a word, prayer, and he means to capture the energy of the active presence of love in which you live, move, and have your being, use that to fuel your mind and your body and pour that energy into the world. If you pursue that, you'll achieve that. But if you've been told that prayer is about putting order to the cosmic gift catalog, you'll pursue that and you'll never achieve the result that we're looking for. There's another interesting aspect of that word in the at another point where Yeshua, and I forget, I'm not very good at chapter and verse, but where Yeshua was talking about prayer, and he says, when you pray, don't go out in the street corners. People who want to be admired will do that, but go into the closet, which my offering would be go into the silence, close the door, do this in private, and then what he says is, and the Father, or the Creator, who sees what you do. This thing called prayer is an act of doing. It's not an act of asking or telling the Creator. It's an act of doing. When he sees what you do, then you'll get your reward. And what is it you're supposed to be doing? Freeing your mind of hostility and fear, aligning with your true human life, which is love, and having that be the predominant resonant energy within your physiology. And when you are engaged in that, when you quote unquote do that, and it's interesting, a lot of Christianity says, well, there's nothing you can do. But here's one of the key things Yeshua is talking about, prayer. And he says, and the Father who sees what you are doing, this is an action that you do. And then go through, all the things that the what's called the Lord's Prayer, but really the Yeshua's instruction set for how to align and orient yourself is what is done. And when it's done, then there is this flow, where perhaps yesterday locked into the genetics of hostility and fear and rage and guilt and lack and poverty and drama and trauma and hatred and vengeance, all the stuff that generations have been about. That when we align and orient ourselves and count on the breath as a part of our lives, then the breath moving that presence of love into our cellular structure frees us from the unconscious dynamics stored in the cell. And one arrives at the point where more and more your physiology hums literally with the presence of love. And my take is that would be the accomplishment of your whole life becoming a prayer, when you accomplish that. And of course, when you realize there are 1,000 generations who've been going in, for most people in totally different directions, that's quite an accomplishment. I mean, it's not something you go, oh, I'll do that next Saturday morning or next Sunday afternoon and then it'll be done. No, it's literally a lifetime of work. But when your physiology is humming along and the active presence of love is what's fueling your physiology, your life has become a prayer. Does that fit? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I finally figured out how to use the mute button. You have to hit the microphone, not the mute.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing, I'm of course going to have to go back and re-listen to this maybe several times, but you mentioned at one point about God watching what you do, and that sounds like it falls into this judgment idea, which we're not supposed to do to ourselves or others, according to what I've taken over listening for quite a while now. And
Right.
also, that also fits into the churchianity idea that, God is going to judge you on your deeds, at the end of your life. And you go to heaven or you go to hell.
Well, I think that's reflective of what's firing in brain cells. But for me, my brain cells don't contain anything that resembles what you just said. What my brain cells hold as I speak that idea is that the Creator is there. Let's step back just a step or two. Do you know how to raise your arm? And I'm asking this a question of everybody that's listening. Do you know how to raise your left arm?
Yes, but not technically.
The truth is, you don't have a clue how to raise your left arm. You know how to do it. You can do it.
Right.
But if I said, Dawn, what I want, and let's call in the greatest expert in physiology and chemistry in the world, and let's have them help us. Now, what I want you to do is tell me exactly what brain cells fire at what voltages to send down what nerve pathways to what muscles to balance, counterbalance, all that's involved in raising your arm. And the truth is, neither of us has a clue how to do that. We can do it, but we don't have a clue. But there's a power in there that does. So what I hear in that description that I gave of what the word prayer means is, and when Yeshua says, get quiet, if you really want to live as a human, get quiet, go into the closet, close the door, and whatever it is that you engage in, what you do, the Creator will replicate for you. It's got nothing to do with the Creator judging and saying, okay, you're good, so now I'll bring you good things. It's got to do with, am I living in a world of hostility and fear, and am I doing, in terms of my thinking, all kinds of, rage and guilt and grief and pain and drama and trauma and lack and, et cetera, et cetera. If that's what's going on in my mind, then each energy, each frequency that fires in my brain cell structure is continuously giving the Creator instructions. And the Creator, I would offer, not only has no judgment involved, but the Creator has no choice. The Creator has said, and you could almost imagine the moment at which the Creator, let's create a fantasy here. We've got this world that is just awesome. I mean, there are elephants and snakes and rats and, all of these creatures, but there isn't one of them can source a new behavior. Everything obeys. Whatever's been set in its genetics, the elephant does what elephants does. The wolf does what a wolf does. We've never seen them originate anything new. The wolf with its cubs on the side of the river, and they get the intuition or the message that there's a storm coming and the river's going to rise, takes their cubs up away from the river. But the wolf doesn't say to itself, oh, there's a storm coming, I'm going to get some sandbags and protect my cubs and my den here. The wolf can't originate anything. And there's nothing in the creation we know of that can, aside from humans. So my offering is what I hear when I speak those words, what my brain cells are filled with is, what energy do I choose to originate? The Creator doesn't because the Creator watches in silence what I do and brings me whatever energies I've engaged in, has nothing to do with the Creator's judgment. It's just the Creator's agreement. And you could imagine the moment at which the Creator said, you know, I've been having a pretty good time here. I got all these creatures, all that. I mean, this earth is awesome, but I'm missing something. And that is, they are all just obedient slaves to what I've set in them. I'm going to create something different. Humans, that's it. I'll create a new level of creation, and then I'm going to turn over humans. I have been in charge of all life up to date, and now I'm going to do something new. I'm going to turn it over to you. You tell me what you want, ask, and I'll give it to you. There's no judgments in that. There's only the power that knows how to do everything, because the truth is we know how to do absolutely nothing, not even raise our arms. But if the thought that I engage in is to raise my arm, then I've done a piece of work. I've originated something, and the Creator carries it out for me. So I don't hear any connotation in this whole idea of prayer and going to the closet, close the door, and the Creator who sees what you do will reward you or bring about the result. That's all. Just bring about the result. It's got nothing to do with judging us or, you know, the good, the bad, or the ugly. If I go into the closet, close the door, and bring in hate and fear, then the results I'm going to see in my life are going to be hate and fear. I originated those results. The Creator didn't judge, oh, I think I'll send them hate and fear. If I go into the closet, close the door, and I'm attuned to and tapped into my essence is the active presence of love, and every thought and everything I originate is aligned with love, the Creator doesn't say, oh, you're doing this out of love, now I'll approve of you and I'll bring you that. The Creator just says, okay, I'll bring it to you. That's my job. I'm going to execute whatever you engage in. And what Yeshua is saying is, in what they called the Lord's Prayer, is you are a human being that has this power to originate, and you're designed to originate in harmony with your true nature. And your true nature is that of active present love. Here's how you originate from a state of active present love. Get quiet, go inside, tap into that, and watch how the Creator unfolds your life before your eyes. How the executive power executes what you've originated.
So
kind of, you know, I mean, you being a chiropractic student, know, kind of like the whole idea in chiropractic that there's this power within us that brings about a result.
right, above, down, inside out is one of the big phrases. I'm sure you know. And the above is the universal intelligence, and goes into the innate intelligence, and then manifests out from the body. Whereas most of science and the allopathic world thinks that everything comes from the outside and goes to
Right.
the in.
Exactly.
Speaking of that, the book that the Anything Can Cause Anything is old
chiropractic
really
text. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a textbook, but it's a text by the guy that was at one time the president. I think it was the Texas Chiropractic College, but it's sort of I don't have it because it like goes for $100 on eBay or something. But it's sort of an analysis of some of B.J. Palmer's ideas. But I looked on Amazon for the one that you mentioned. I think the one you mentioned must be a different book. The Anything Can Cause Anything and Anything Can Heal Anything. I couldn't find it on Amazon, so that must be a different book.
Well, I'm remembering that title, Anything Can Cause Anything, Anything Can Heal Anything, from way back when I taught at Life Chiropractic in Atlanta back 40 years ago.
Right, yeah. It probably exists somewhere, but no used sellers on Amazon, at least. At least I couldn't find it. So how do you because maybe you don't at all based on what you just said. How do you differentiate meditation from prayer, if there is a differentiation?
So I would consider prayer to be a more active state, where meditation would be a state where you simply go into silence and you're not looking to originate anything. By the way, I just looked, and the Canadian Chiropractic Association has William D. Harper's Anything Can Cause Anything as a PDF.
Oh,
You
really?
can download.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the guy. William Harper was the president of that Texas college.
Right.
It's kind of strange because my understanding is the Canadian Chiropractic College is pretty allopathic oriented as more and more
Really?
going. Yeah. So yeah, one of my mentors graduated from there years and years ago and had nothing good to say about them.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a trend across. There's very few what are called straight chiropractic colleges anymore that are
Right.
heavily philosophy based. And more and more.
No, it's like very much like the orthopedists have become. Push drugs, sell drugs, forget about. I mean, I've worked with or not orthopedics, but what is it I'm thinking of? Osteopath. Yeah, and I've worked with students of osteopathy, and they haven't even been taught manipulation. Like, that's just gone, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yep, that's been in the U.S. school. Apparently, if you go to the schools in Europe, they still teach sort of original osteopathic ideas. But like a lot of people don't know, but Mercola himself is an osteopath. He's not an MD,
Right.
And I doubt that I think he went to he used to be based in Chicago, so I actually saw him a few times, but. I doubt that he got any training in osteopathy. He certainly didn't have it as part of his practice when he was practicing. So
right. I'm just looking through, and there are actually a number of different places you can download that book free as a PDF. I just did it, and then I looked for anything can cause anything, can cure anything, but I don't see that anywhere. So maybe that was somebody's. Misinterpretation of Harper's original title.
Right. One sort of separate thing. I know we only got 10 minutes left.
Go for it.
What's your take on, which I often see, and I, in my mind, I'm rolling my eyes, if not literally, in the sports world. Typically, after a win, I never really hear it after a loss, but these athletes, whether they're collegiate or professional, will go on and first thing they say is all glory goes to God, and whatever, God blessed us with this win, and thank God for allowing us to win. Or you'll hear before games that they'll huddle, and obviously not the same kind of prayer that we've been talking about, but they'll pray for God to grant them a win, which just seems so incredibly, what's the word to use? Fundamentally flawed, I guess, is the only thing I can come up with.
Well, again, that comes from them. As it's, I don't know what happened. We disappeared there for a second, but we're back. Yeah, that comes from an errant definition. And I think an even more insane thing is you look at armies, both supposedly Christian, kneeling down in the battlefield, praying for the death and destruction of the person on the other side of the field. It's like, what kind of insanity is that?
Yeah.
And it's time for us to clean up our minds and get back to the truth about human life, what we're really designed to function as.
Yeah, and it's of course evolved from sports because politics is like blood sport now. I mean, you've talked about breads and circuses before, and I mean, it strikes me how close the things going on in this country and around the world is like the people in the Roman Colosseum. It's just shocking.
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. And Celinda's just made a comment. And Solly, I hope we will get to talk at some point. What's Harper's title? Oh, the title of this book is "Anything Can Cause Anything."
Oh, the one, I'll let you get to Celinda, but one comment I wanted to make about that title too, which fits right in, and you've talked about this before with your Einstein and Planck and Tesla quotes, is that that's a quantum holistic, WH holistic sort of approach or ideology, which is, way more accurate in my view, because this is that I've talked to you before about this morphogenic field technique, and biofield testing is a quantum sort of approach using the field as the biofeedback rather than like testing your liver reflex point and see if it's weak, and then see if this one, traditionally, whatever, milk thistle is going to strengthen that point. I mean, there's some value to that, but compared to a quantum approach, where you're actually just dealing directly with energy, and the field as representative of your vitality and your energy is so much more powerful. And with this work, again, going back to the anything can cause anything, and then your addition of anything can heal anything, when you're dealing with the energy of things, typically a certain substance or supplement, and it can be completely, if you can let go of your linear mind, which I'm often reminded of when I go to these particular seminars, it could be something completely unrelated in your mind or knowledge base related to the liver that could actually turn off whatever negative energy in your body. This is a little bit separate from, the thoughts and stuff that you talk about in your work, but it could be whatever. I don't know. It could be
But it's being done with thought.
Right. But it could be something completely unrelated that you would never think of having to do with the liver that could actually turn off what we call the problem energy.
Right.
So that's, to me, why it's so great. But
yeah. Change your thinking, change your life.
Right.
That's really at the core of it all. And of course, apply forgiveness to the patterned generational thoughts, and you make a quantum leap in what your thinking is capable of. As you delete, as you forgive the habitual old patterns, there's another proper interpretation around the idea of forgiveness, and as it would come out at the Aramaic Lord's Prayer, and it speaks of, or it can be properly translated as, relieve us of our habit mind. Get us out of this habitual way. And oftentimes people can be convinced that this is going to change that. And as you say, this has nothing to do with that, but it changes anyway because the underlying creative energy of thought is what changed and changed the whole game.
Right. Yep, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the refinement, sir, and what you've been thinking through, and call more often.
All right, I'll try. I'm often out walking at this time, which is why I don't call. But now that I know how to use the mute button, maybe I can do that. So yeah,
awesome.
Thanks again, always, for your insight and passion and dedication to this work. Because the world definitely needs your wisdom.
We're going to take it to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. That's the plan.
Right.
Cool.
All right,
sir.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, blessings. Nice to say hello. And thank you, everybody, for joining us, holding the space that you are about to have the best year yet of your eternal life, and pass it on. Blessings. Bye-bye.